All right, we're looking at Chapter 4 now, and Chapter 4 is kind of a split chapter where we do some CSS stuff at the beginning, and then we start talking about graphics and images. And the author's thought in all this is the stuff that we're looking at is a lot more visual in nature than, let's say, changing a font or the color of a font or the spacing of a font. These are more layout type of things, and there's a lot of stuff to learn here. And like I said, I don't think I'm going to be able to get through all this material. There's 49 slides here, so it's indicative of the amount of material there is to learn here. All right, let's press forward quickly, and let's take a look at our first significant slide here. And we're going to learn a new tag, which is the horizontal rule, it's called, an HR tag. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring up my HTML file, and I'm going to actually put in an HR tag right here. And this is actually a very old school HTML element. You'll notice it does not have a closing tag. You can, if you wish, use the XHTML approach, which is to do that. That's fine if you do that. But this is all you really need. I'm going to save that. And once again, let's bring it up in our browser, take a look at the monstrosity we've created, wherever that happens to be, right here. I'm going to do a refresh, and you see that little line in there? It's pretty cool, right? Very simple little effect, but it does create a division, and that helps to separate page contents. And in days of old, that was one of the few tools that we had to kind of separate content on a page, because it's HTML. It's not anything to do with CSS. The neat thing about that is you can actually style it. You can make it different colors, different widths, heights. You can actually make it an image if you wish. You can do all sorts of stuff. So that's kind of a fun one. That's called a horizontal rule. Another one that's kind of fun to play with is a border. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to do exactly what they're doing, and I'm going to just go to my code here, and I have an H2 in here somewhere, don't I? Right there. So I'm going to go to my style sheet, and right underneath H1, seems like a nice place to put it, we'll do H2, and I'm not sure how they approached it here. All right, they're doing exactly the same thing that I would normally do. And this is what we call a compound selector. Now, a lot of styles, for example, like background, you can use as a standalone term, or if you saw when I was typing, I would go background dash, and it would have color, image, size, position, all these different things. Now, a lot of that stuff can be actually addressed in one fell swoop, very much like this. Because really what's going on here is they're saying border thickness, and actually border width is that technical term, is 2 pixels thick. It's solid, but you can also make it dashed or other formats. And then you can also declare a color. All in one fell swoop. So let's go ahead and just try that on the page. And let's do a refresh. You can see I made a nice little box. Very primitive effect, but it can be very effective. And I'm sure you can probably think of a whole bunch of different scenarios where you can use it already. Now notice that you can do that style around something that's block level, and that's why this one takes up the whole width of the screen. But you can also do it with an inline element, so it just goes around something in its spot. You can wrap it around an anchor tag like they're doing here, or you could wrap it around a span tag if you wish. Those are the 2 most common applications for it, maybe images. Now, here's kind of an important slide. Hello, browser differences. Different browsers will make stuff look different when it comes to some of these properties. And then to kind of complicate it a little bit further, different operating systems will also adjust it a little bit. So if you notice here, these are all the different components. So we use solid, right? But you also have none. And why would you say none? The reason would be if you're trying to supersede a style somewhere else in the style sheet. Okay, specificity once again. But there's dashed and dotted and ridged. And for the most part, I don't use much more than solid, frankly. I mean, personally. Yeah. But you might find times when these other ones might work for you. It creates a little bit of a dimension. It's kind of hard to see there, but it basically simulates like light shining on an edge. All right, so that's something you should play with, really. Now, you can also do this. When you apply borders, and this is true with many of the styles, borders wrap all the way around an object, right? If I wanted, I could selectively style each edge of that border. I could style the top differently from the bottom or from the side, or I could just have a top and a bottom and no sides, or just a bottom. It can do all sorts of stuff. So it's really kind of an imagination thing. So I'm not going to demonstrate it, but this is the approach that you would use. Another thing that's pretty handy, and this is one that you'll want to try quite a bit, and I'm just going to go ahead and drop it in, is a thing called padding. Padding is the space created inside of an object. Okay, inside of an object. So when I add padding of 5 pixels to this H2, watch what happens as I refresh. It creates a little bit of visual space. Really what it did is from that border, it's pushing inwards 5 pixels from all directions. It effectively is increasing the size of the object by 5 pixels. Because if you saw what it was before, the words were practically touching the edges. And the box was that size. When I added the padding, it increased the size of the box. And when you're doing your styling, you're going to find out that you have to accommodate those pixels. You have to count the border pixels, 2 pixels, right? All the way around. And you have to accommodate the 5 pixels that are within. So that's padding. That is a very effective tool at making a comfortable layout. Padding is your friend. All right. As with the borders, you can selectively apply the padding. So you can put different amounts of padding on the top, the right, the bottom, and the left. Right? And you can specify it in very much this way. So if I want to increase the padding here, if I want to say padding top 15, padding bottom 5, let's refresh. See what happened? There's more on top, less on the bottom, none on the left. There's also a shortcut way to do some of these where when you have like top, right, bottom, and left that you can address separately. Remember this acronym. Here's the acronym. Top, right, bottom, left, trouble. Right? And this is why it's important. When you start working on a style sheet, as we did with the border before, I can actually just say padding, not address any of the sides specifically, and then I can, in the order of that acronym, top, right, bottom, left, trouble, I can say the top padding is 15, right padding is 20, even though we won't see it, the bottom padding is 30, and that's too much. Let's make it 10. And let's make the left padding 40. Top, right, bottom, left. Got that? Okay, watch the result. Okay, so you see the effect. You're not really seeing the right, but if there was stuff over here, you would see it. once again, it helps with visual appeal, and it makes it more comfortable for the eye to read. Spacing around stuff inside of an HTML page is critical. When you see a page that doesn't have good spacing, it's hard to read. It really is. Now, once again, they're showing you this shortcut technique. But notice in this one, they're only applying it twice. So what happens if you only use two declarations, it's top and bottom, left and right. Right? Because if the top and the bottom are the same, the left and right are the same, you just say it twice. Now there is an approach where you can use three of them, but I always forget which ones apply. I think it's top, bottom, it's top, left and right. Yeah, something like that. I forget, so don't quote me on it. Typically the ones you'll see are all four or two. So it's symmetrical. Okay, this is the technique I just showed you, right? Little hands-on practice. And we played with some of this stuff, so you can start to see though that as they're building up the example, how like just applying little bits of style to different components helps to identify things that are important on the page. What's a header, where a new section is, what's navigation, all that stuff starts to break down into pieces. Now we move on to a new topic, a very important one. So far we've just been dealing with text on the page. Boring, right? The web is a visual medium. Images make the web pop, basically. So we can apply various types of graphics to a page. There's different file formats for graphics. You guys might already be aware of this. But typically the ones that we'll use most often on web pages are the three that you see here. Not necessarily in the order of prevalence, but these are the three most common image formats on the web. So let's learn a little bit about each one of them. GIF is a really old file format. It actually stems from a company called CompuServe. Does that sound familiar? Old timers? I'm not picking on anybody, I'm just saying. But CompuServe, way back when, before there was really a true public internet that people could tap into, they had like an online bulletin board system. And one of the things that they brought to the game was the ability to throw images into their portal. And the way they did it was with this file format called GIF. It does not allow for a lot of color depth. It's only 256 colors. It's usually best for very simple images, but it does have a couple of really unique features. One is transparency. So you can create, let's say, a picture of something, and most pictures on a computer, not most, all pictures on a computer are rectangular in shape. But sometimes you want to be able to see through, so you could create, like, let's say, an image of a football, but you would see past the corner, so you can make it transparent. And that's huge. The other thing that you can do with a GIF that's really neat is you can actually create snapshots in various states. So I could have, let's say, a GIF that's got 5 different images in it, and if it does, it animates. So you can create things that move and do things with GIFs. So one thing that you can do is animate, can be animated, see right there. It does also have some compression built in, so it allows for very small file sizes. So if you have like a logo or something, or an image that's just like a couple of different colors, GIFs are often a very good choice because you can create a very, very small, efficient file. Another format, one of the more prevalent ones, is a JPEG. JPEGs are typically the file format, like if you take a picture on your phone or your digital camera, that's typically the file format that's generated, a JPEG. JPEGs are really good for photographic style images, right? So in other words, there's not a lot of solid colors. There's a big variety of colors and textures. You know, like that's really kind of a good example. It supports a wide color palette. When you get up to that 16.7 million colors, that's pretty much true color. There's pretty much hit everything in that range. It does have compression built in, meaning if I were to take a picture on my camera, and maybe, I don't know if any of you people are photography people at all, but if you take a picture on a camera, cameras offer a couple different modes, and usually professional cameras are the ones that offer what we call RAW mode, right? Where they capture a digital image and none of it is compressed. If you capture an image like on a 10 megapixel camera that's not compressed, one single picture can be like 50 megabytes. But you don't lose any quality. But that's pretty unreasonable for most people. You don't really want to post that on your Facebook page, right? Facebook wouldn't be too happy. They want something a little more efficient. JPEG is a really good format because you can compress it and make the file much, much, much smaller in file size. So you can take it from 50 megabytes maybe down to 50 kilobytes and still have it look pretty decent. So it's a really good choice on a web page for a photographic style image. The other format, the one that's the more modern one, and a lot of people prefer this. However, I'm going to give you a little caveat. It's not always the most efficient file size, but it combines kind of the features of JPEGs where it does have some compression built in, and it supports transparency, and it supports animation. But you got to be careful how you apply it, because I could take an image that's a PNG that's, let's say, fills my screen, and it might be several megabytes in size, and I can also have a JPEG that looks just as clear that'll be a fraction of the file size. So sometimes you need to be careful with what you pick. A lot of it takes practice, and what I'm hoping to do, maybe even as soon as next week in class, is maybe we'll do a little bit of kind of like a clinic on how to work with images, because it's really an important skill for working with web page design. Now, how do you actually get a picture onto your web page? Well, first of all, you need a picture to start with, right? So let's go out to the internet and steal some. Use some for educational purposes. What should we search for? Give me a... Wait, we always talk guitar, right? There we go. All right. Ben, this is one that I own, if they have it. There we go. Kind of like that. Okay, I'm looking for one that looks just like mine. I don't see one. But I think you get the point. Let's just pick one to work with. That's kind of a nice one right there. All right, so I'm going to click here and just click on View Image. There's a picture of the guitar. And I'm just going to right-click it, Save Image As. And I'm going to take this and put it in the folder where my work is. So that's in my Google Drive folder on my machine. Web 1, wherever that is. What week is this? Actually, I need to be really careful here. Where's my work? Yeah, you guys aren't even sure. I'm not sure either. I'm going to go back here. I'm going to take a look. Web programming, fall 2016. Now, this stuff is right in the root because this is my launch page. Okay, not a great idea, but this is my launch page. So I'm going to put it right here. All right, I'm going to save it right there. All right, so now it's in my folder. Oh, wait a second. I don't even remember the name of the file, so I'm going to go to my folder. Now, watch this trick. This is a great trick. Here's the folder. Oh, you guys aren't seeing it. Here's the folder. That doesn't look right to me. I put it in the wrong spot. It needs to be here. Let's go in there. I'm going to move it to Web 1. Oh, wait, okay. You guys see what I just did? Oh, wait, that's the same folder. All right, up one level. Thanks, Alex. I like being laughed at. All right, right-click, rename. You guys watching this trick? Select all of it. Control-C to copy. Now, you guys are saying, why am I going to do this? Because when I put it in my code, I'm not going to make a mistake with the file name. One of the biggest problems I see with what people do when they first work with images. So now let's go to the code. I'm going to go to my index page. And obviously I'm going to have to restructure all this, right? And right here, I'm going to drop in an image link. So that works like this. IMG, SRC, that's the source file, that's what it stands for. Paste in the file name, close the double quotes, and believe it or not, that's all it takes. Now there's more I can add to this, and some of you already know that. I understand that. But let's take a look at what this does to the web page. Not too bad, right? Looks okay. Mine's cooler, it's black. I would never buy a guitar that color, sorry. All right, back to it. Now notice that the author is putting in a bunch of other stuff. Now I'm going to follow suit here. One thing he's adding, and according to the HTML5 specification, when you put an image on a page, you need to include an alt attribute. The point of an alt attribute is to provide a textual description of what you're seeing. So I'm going to type in Kramer Stagemaster guitar. All right, folks. We're talking about these attributes that you can add to an image. So I'm going to go back to our code, and I showed you the alt tag. Let me show you what the point of an alt tag is. You see how I just broke the file name there? When I go back to my browser now to reload the page, you see what happened? The image didn't show up, but in its place is text that indicates what it was. So it's considered good practice because that way if somebody is reading the page with a screen reader, right? Or something happens to the file system, somebody deletes the file, at least you get some text telling you what should be there. All right. Here's another thing we're going to learn, and these are some really important concepts here, and we will reinforce them over the coming weeks. So don't worry if you don't memorize it all right away. Each image will have, as the slide shows, potentially, you don't have to put this in, you can put it in a height and a width. So these height and width attributes are measured in pixels. All images that you will download and use on a website like the one that we just did, right? Notice the size of the file, 14 kilobytes. Why I have a perpetual hourglass right now, I'm not really quite sure. Something's going on in the background. But notice as I hovered over the image in the file system, that dimensions, what does that say? 630 by 164. Another way you can get that information, I should probably show you this, you can right click and do a properties. This works on a Mac too, it's a little different, but it works on a Mac. And we'll click on details, and then it will show you the size of the image. This is very, very important when you're working on a web page. You need to be able to account for every pixel on the screen. If you don't, when you start doing layouts that you want to be very particularly perfect, and you will, every pixel counts. One pixel off and the whole page can break. So it's pretty important that you get it precise. 630 by 164. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go back to my code and I'm going to add that in. I'm going to say width equals 630. Notice I don't have to put the px in there. That's assumed. What was it? 134. Now, I'm already keeping in mind that my file name is still broken. I'm saving the file, I'm going back to the browser, and I am refreshing. Do you notice that if you look really close at the screen, you can see the shape is reserved for the file. Now, why is this important? When you set this, these settings, you need to set it ideally for the exact size of the image. And the reason for these tags isn't to resize the image, although you can resize the image, and I'll show you that in a second. The reason is to secure the space on the screen for the object, whether it renders or not. I'm sure you guys have been into the situation where maybe you go to a web page, and this web page has a lot of text, but it also has a lot of images, right? There's so many images it takes a while to load. You start reading some of the content, and as you're reading, boom, it pops off the screen. Have you guys ever experienced that? That's because whoever put the images on the page didn't reserve the space with the height and the width tag. So every time an image jumps in, it moves the text. If you put in those parameters, the space will be reserved whether or not the image is there. All right, so let me go ahead and put that back in. Let's fix that and refresh. Is anybody catching what's wrong here? Look at the file size. Look at the attribute I set. 134, but it's really 164. Nobody even caught me. And I did that on purpose. And maybe I'll make it even like more dramatic. Let's make it 104. And I'll save it. And take a look at what's happening to the image here. It's skewing. It's not a good thing. I mean, you can do that for effect, right? By intent. But it's not a good thing because if you're trying to force an image that's one size into a shape that's another, it is going to distort. In some cases, very badly, noticeably. So ideally, you want to have this match up with the actual size of the image. So now I'll go back and refresh, and it looks good again. Now I can also use that height and width to, I'm going to make it, 900 by, 300, right? I'm just guessing. Not good. That's also not a good thing to do. Okay. It did make it bigger, but if you really start to get in there, as soon as you start taking images and making them bigger this way, you're going to notice that there's lots of little artifacts and rough edges, and it just generally doesn't look good. What really is the best approach, folks, and I will repeat this over time many times because it doesn't seem to stick with people always on the first attempt, is set these to whatever the actual size of the image is. Now, if you happen to grab an image that is huge and you want to make it small, really what you should do is you should take that image, and I'm going to do that right now. So I'm going to take this image, and I'm going to bring it up in an editing program. Now, you don't need very fancy tools to do this. In Windows, you can right-click the file, open with Paint. That's the built-in photo editor. Very primitive, but it works. This is what the image looks like natively. Notice that there's a resize command. I'm going to click it. I'm going to move it over to the side here. But I'm going to want to change the size of it, and I'm going to switch to pixels. These are the actual pixels. And if I wanted to make it, 400 pixels across, and notice how this box is checked here, it maintains its aspect ratio. So I change one, the other changes automatically. I'm going to save it. Now when I go back to my page, now this is going to be maybe a little painful. I'm going to refresh. It's not quite right. You know why it's not quite right is because that code, it still has these dimensions in it. What were the new dimensions? 104. So now when I go back and refresh, it's smaller, but it has the right aspect ratio. The dimensions are proportional. If you're making a minor tweak to size and you're pretty good about your math, and you do it proportionally, you'll be okay. However, chances are you probably won't do your math right. That's why you use a piece of software to do it for you. And if you're finding yourself trying to take an image inside your HTML and radically changing the dimensions of the image, you're doing the wrong thing. And I know people will tell you and teach you otherwise, but listen to me when I tell you. I'll tell you, right? I'll tell you that you want to make the image the size you need it, and then specify the width and the height to the actual size of the image. If you really need to resize it, there's other techniques. Okay. One technique would be to control the width and the height in your CSS. You can do that too. You don't have to do it inside the attribute. One way to make an image show up the size that it is actually just to remove these. But then you run into the problem where the screen space is not reserved. Okay, a lot of different little nuances there to play with. You'll discover as you play. But if you're using an image and it's like distorting, it's like squished or stretched or whatever, then you need to go back and see what its actual size is and apply it. Brian? Absolutely. Okay, Brian. Right. Yeah, if you know what the width of the image is, you can just put one of those in and the height will automatically proportionally adjust. Now the other aspect of that is if I get rid of the height, for example, and I switch this to 800 and then refresh, the width will go to 800 and the height automatically goes to the right thing. And that is a little blurry. You probably can't see that up on the big screen. That's a little blurry. The web's a visual medium. Have some nice pictures. You know. I also want to caution you guys because we live in this like Google world where I can come in here and Google any image. But please be aware that not all images are free to use. For educational purposes, we kind of get a pass in a lot of ways. Because we're just learning how to do this, so it's not a big deal, right? Because we're not using it to make money or to further some sort of cause. But if you are using it to make money and trying to further a cause, you want to come in here and click the search tool and then check this little box here. It says usage rights. And some of them are labeled for reuse with modification, meaning you could copy it, adjust it a little bit, and call it your own. Like you did something to it to make it your own. Labeled for reuse, people like, I don't care. Non-commercial reuse with modification, that would be like us, right? We take an image, we maybe resize it or color it or do something to it. We're not making money off of it. And then for educational purposes like us, all of a sudden we have like hardly anything to work with, right? Can I tell you the best way to put an image on a website? Is create your own. Hire somebody that does it. There's also sites where you can buy stock photos. We have beautiful, professionally shot photographs. Costs money though. If you were part of our graphics program, you would discover the students in that program have access to some of like the big repositories for free. Right? Create your images if you can. All right, let's see what our next topic is here. There was a lot to chew on there, wasn't there? One slide, but it's a very important slide. All right, I think we talked about that. All right, let's do this one. Up right there. Not only can you put an image on a page, but you can make it a link. Isn't that cool? You can wrap an href tag around it. And where are we going to go with it? Yahoo? I'm not sure where to take it, so. No, I'm going to Yahoo. My mind is set. And then you just put the anchor tag at the beginning, before the image, and the closing tag after, and the whole image becomes a link. Very simple. Back to the browser and refresh, wherever the browser is. That's the page. Let's refresh. Notice how it's an image now, or a link. See a pointer? And it works. Yay. All right. That's a very simple technique, but that's an important one too. There's nothing too special about doing that technique. I do want to go back and fix this little bit of code. I basically want to, it was 400 wide, right? So let's set it back to that so it scales appropriately. Okay, that's much better. I'm going to see if we can, any more stuff that we can toggle here. I think that we're probably at the point, this is a good stopping point. So somebody take note that we got halfway through the slideshow, and we will continue it next week, because there's a lot of really important concepts in this chapter. If you really want the rest of the content before you dig into your homework, I do have archive videos in the unit folder, so you can look there to get the rest of the material. But a very important chapter, a lot of topics to wrap your head around. All right, that ends this video, and we'll see you guys next week.